Welcome to my channel. In the next video, dear viewers, today, I invite you to travel back in time and feel the greatness and glory of the Roman Empire. Our historical tour will take us to the Soissons region of France, the land on which the last outpost of the Romans was located in ancient times and where military events and memorable battles unfolded, making this land special. The Soissons region, located in the northern part of France, has a rich history stretching back over many centuries. However, we pay special attention to the period when this area was the last outpost of the Romans and the territory of Gaul. In those days, when the Roman Empire was at the peak of its power and greatness, the Soissons region was an important strategic object. There were trade routes that connected the empire with other areas. The Romans not only created prosperous cities here, but also built magnificent military fortifications to ensure the safety and protection of this land. In my video, we will understand not only which of these points of view is more historical, but also talk about the phenomenon of the Soissons region and its influence on the history of Western Europe. Immediately, we note essential moments for diving into the era. The first name of the territory of the Soissons region is conditional. For the Western Roman Empire until its fall, these lands were the provinces of Gaul, while the neighboring Germanic tribes, primarily the Franks and Visigoths, called it the Kingdom of the Romans or the Kingdom of the Romans. Since the 9th-10th century after the Carolingian Renaissance, in medieval sources, predominantly Old given territories are increasingly referred to as the Kingdom of the Domain of Soissons or the Kingdom of Soissons. The Soissonian region does not have an exact date of occurrence. So in the scientific historical literature, one can find a variety of opinions about the dating and, accordingly, the period of existence of this pseudo-state formation. There is a thesis that the beginning of the Soissons region should be sought from the moment the Aegidius Syagrius was appointed to the post of military master Gallium. There is a version that the year 461 should be considered a more correct starting point when Syagri refuses to recognize the new Western Roman emperor and gives rise to Northern Gallic separatism. 3. The version is 464, the year of the death of Syagrius. After all, only after the power over the Soissons region was inherited and the Roman numeral of the Gallic autonomous territory was finally consolidated. Among these versions, there are no exceptionally true ones because, in fact, there are not many reliable sources and information about its rulers available to researchers. Therefore, the dates often depend on what the applicant is focusing on, and all versions are equally entitled to exist. In fact, the important question that confronts us from the very beginning is why the barbarians singled out the government of Soissons and its lands separately from other former Roman lands of Gaul. After all, we will not find such a connection of Roman territories under the rule of an autonomous Roman ruler in Spain, Africa, or so on, although even in these lands, the Germanic tribes controlled far from every corner of the earth. With the designation of these issues, perhaps the story should begin with the Soissons region. After the breakthrough of the German hordes across the Rhine in 406-409, Gaul turned out to be overrun by the Burgundians, Visigoths, Franks, and part of the Sarmatian tribe of the Alans, while the Vandals and most of the Alans went to Spain. After that period, Gaul became a hotbed of barbarian settlements, threatening directly Rome and the capital of the Western Roman Empire, Ravenna. If Spain and its barbarians are isolated from Italy by land on one side and by sea on the other side, Spain did not have a fleet that could be used by the barbarians with African Vandals and Alans who took control of North Africa and the Carthaginian fleet. Then the emperor succeeded in reaching an agreement and parity, and in the end, the Mediterranean Sea still acted as a natural obstacle, but direct land routes to Italy opened through Gaul. It was this fact that led to the close attention of the Western Roman rulers to these territories and, as a result, even more militarization. But we should not forget that Gaul, for centuries, was already crowded with armies, since it bordered on the warlike Germanic tribes along the Rhine River. For this reason, from this period, the highest military masters appointed in Gaul had such a striking success in Western Roman politics because it was they who passed control over one of the richest, most populated, fortified, and armed provinces of the West. From the moment of the 1st, 3rd, and 5th centuries, a series of military masters of Gaul followed, who, thanks to their primary military activities, achieved high success. Flavius Aetius was originally the military master of Gaul, elevated at the expense of his troops and resources. Gallic Roman aristocrat Flavius Avitus initially held command positions, and then became a Western Roman emperor for a short time. His son Ictitius Avitus, with the crown of the halo of Roman aristocratic dominance, is the emperor of Gallic Roman origin. But Flavius Majorian is considered by some historians to be the latter's legitimate emperor of the Western Roman Empire. Majorian, in fact, for the first time after Flavius, suppressed the Germans of Gaul, pushing them back to their original territories of settlement and returning the actual state of the Visigoths, Burgundians, and Franks as Roman allies. However, soon after that, Majorian faced a number of problems that subsequently led to the paradoxical alienation of Gaul from the Western Roman Empire. The fact is that the Italian Roman nobility perceived Majorian as a stranger, a prodigy of the Gallic Roman provincial aristocracy. This left its mark on the already difficult relations of the emperor with his officials and military leaders, not all of whom shared the emperor's desire to strengthen the presence of Gallic Romans in the Senate and at the court of Ravenna. On the other hand, Majorian's passivity in promoting the provincial aristocracy, in an attempt to reach a compromise between the center and the regions, already caused dissatisfaction on the part of the Gallic Romans themselves. As a result, in the 457th year, a betrayal by part of the Roman nobility followed, who entered into an alliance with the Burgundians and transferred to them the large city of Gallia Lugdunum. In this situation, which threatens the empire with a major split and civil war, Majorian obviously, in order not to lose the part of Gaul that is still loyal to him and not to look like an invader, decided not to personally suppress the rebellion. Instead, he appointed one of his supporters from the Roman aristocracy, Aegidius Afranius, as the military master of Gaul, removing the less reliable military master Agrippinus from his post. The decision turned out to be successful. He did not behave passively like his predecessor, who preferred a defensive strategy, but on the contrary, sought to impose war on the barbarians on his own terms. Already in the year 458, he recaptured Lugdunum, the former regional capital of Gaul, from the Burgundians. However, around the same time, the Britons moved to Armorica. In the scientific community, there is a hypothesis according to which Aegidius Afranius was the very commander to whom the Britons actually turned for protection from the Anglo-Saxons. Although the empire was not in a position to satisfy their request, they were allowed to settle in the northwest of Armorica as allies. Ironically, Majorian was not really saved from death by this. In fact, in his last successful major order, it was at that moment that another escalation of the conflict with the kingdom of the Vandals and Alans took place. After a failed Vandal landing attempt in Italy, Majorian successfully counterattacked and headed for Spain, where he took control of a large part of the east coast. In August 461, when Majorian arrived with an army in Dertona to prepare a throw to Africa, the legionaries, mainly from Italics, revolted and forced him to renounce his imperial title. As it will soon become clear, these events are the result of a conspiracy of the military master of the Ricimer, who, taking advantage of the unpopularity of Majorian's power among the Italian Roman nobility, incited part of the army to rebellion. Soon, Majorian was captured by Ricimer's men and executed. The military master of Gaul, Aegidius Syagrius, who, according to one version, was in the retinue of Majorian during the rebellion and miraculously did not lose his life, did not accept the new power. He considered all supporters of the hypocrite as traitors and nevertheless was allowed to return to Gaul, where he continued to lead active wars with the Germans. In 463, Aegidius defeated the Visigoth invasion at the Battle of Obrelli. Shortly after these events, Aegidius won a series of victories over the Visigoths in the vicinity of Augusteratum. However, fearing a lack of people and resources, as well as the start of an open war with the Western Roman Empire, he did not dare to finish off the Visigoths and never invaded Aquitaine. The main factor in the loneliness of Syagrius in the war with the barbarians of Gaul was, of course, the recent death of Majorian. Syagrius did not receive support from Italian Roman authorities, probably at the instigation of the hypocrite, for whom Galla, the Roman military leader, was a protege of his former direct political enemy. In addition, Syagrius refused to recognize what was proclaimed back in 461, the puppet Western Roman Emperor Libius Severus, which, of course, did not improve his relations. From that moment on, northern Gaul would forever be out of the direct control of the Western Roman Empire. After his death in 464, Afranius Syagrius left behind an heir, Aegidius Syagrius, who, like his father, continued to consider all Western Roman emperors illegitimate. Gaul, controlled by Syagrius at that time, included the western part of Belgica and the north of Lugdunum Gaul, while Septimania and the southern part of Gaul were under the control of the Western Roman Empire and the protege of the prefect of Gaul, Arvand. Dual power reigned in Gaul. On the one hand, Aegidius Syagrius proclaimed himself the military governor of the province. On the other hand, neither the southern garrisons nor the highest rulers of Gaul actually obeyed him. However, Syagrius still had leverage that did not allow them to simply take action against him. For example, the most combat-ready troops of Gaul, whose main centers for several centuries were located along the Rhine and Belgica and extended deep into the northwest and north of the province. In this struggle, Aegidius Syagrius could rely only on the army, his court of administrators, and subordinate commanders of the Comites. In general, northern Gaul under Syagrius' control was a typical Roman administration. A separate issue was the composition of its population and possessions. In addition to the Roman majority, Alans and Britons lived there. Syagrius also had to demonstrate his supreme power, being both the military leader of the Romans and, from an ideological point of view, as the barbarian king of the Romans. From this point of view, Aegidius Syagrius, from the very beginning of his reign, was not a typical Roman governor. The confrontation with the empire resumed with renewed vigor when, in 469, Emperor Procopius Anthemius entered into a separate alliance with the Britons and tried to subjugate the Visigoths with their help. With them, he probably planned to strike at the Gallic possession of the aegis of Syagrius. However, the betrayal of the prefect of Gaul, Arvand, who was afraid for his own possession, did not allow this to happen. As a result, although his collusion with the enemy was exposed and Arvand himself was sent into exile for life, this was done after the Britons were defeated by the Visigoths in the battle and hastily retreated to the north of Gaul. With their retreat, they provided the Goths with a pretext for war, and, ironically, ruin fell precisely on the possession of Syagrius. Here, the experienced Gallo-Romans came out against the Visigoths. Pavel, subordinate to Aegidius, commanded the Roman garrisons just in the area of the Loire River. King Eric received a sudden and serious rebuff and did not dare to move further north, choosing southern Gaul as his target. The ensuing ambush of the Visigoths, the defeat of the legion sent from Italy by Emperor Anthemius, turned out to be a complete loss of southern Gaul and Septimania for the west. The Western Roman Empire received another blow from which it could no longer recover. From now on, realizing his loneliness in Gaul, Syagrius sought to take the nearest barbarians under his protection by making them not just federates, but full-fledged Roman subjects. His policy can be traced to the events of the Saxon invasion of Belgica in 470. The battle near the city of Andicavorum resulted in the famous Commit Pavel. The decisive role was played by the Frankish federates, led by Childeric. The Saxons managed to defeat them, and subsequently, Childeric launched a campaign against them. For all this, Syagrius promoted Childeric to the rank of Dux Belgicae, which was a consequence of his desire to strengthen alliances and control over the Franks. However, in a broader perspective, it turned out to be a fatal mistake because he unknowingly put the barbarian ruler on the same level as himself and created a precedent in which the Frankish king Childeric, as an equal to the Syagrius clan, could also claim power in Soissons. The events of 476 that unfolded in Italy led to the actual overthrow of Western Roman imperial power. The nominal Western Roman emperor, Julius Nepos, in fact, was nothing more than the governor of Dalmatia, while the real political power was concentrated in the hands of Flavius Odoacer. He did not care much about being cut off from the Italian possessions and, in fact, separatist Gaul Syagrius. As a result, after 476, when the barbarian rulers of Gaul finally realized that Syagrius is not supported by the imperial authorities, a series of breaks begins in federal treaties with the Soissons region. In many ways, the death of the Frankish king Childeric, who was at the same time the manager of Belgica, became decisive for subsequent events unfolding in Gaul. It was previously mentioned in this video that the dynastic coalition that Syagrius involuntarily created appointed the Frankish king Childeric as the manager of Belgica. Right now, in 481, when Clovis took power into his hands, his son at that time was only one of dozens of Frankish kings. This policy of Syagrius will create perhaps a unique precedent that influenced the further history of the early Middle Ages. If we understand the fact that Syagrius did not want to fix heredity, transferring positions from the barbarians, then the main point of his conflict with the Franks, rather, is his non-recognition of Clovis in the position of manager. Then during in many ways, the legendary events of Clovis's campaign against Soissons acquire a much more rational and qualitatively new character, like the struggle of two dynasties for power in northern Gaul. Clovis did not have absolute power over the Soissonian Franks, but was only able to win over to his side those directly subordinate to him as the self-proclaimed ruler of Belgica and enlist the support of only a few other kings of the Franks, Ragnacar, who ruled in the city of Cambrai, and Bahamad. The suddenness of the strike prevented the Romans, with all their might, from approaching Soissons when the battle unfolded under its walls. After the defeat, the rest of the Roman army and the nobility, along with Syagrius, went to the lands of the Visigoths. However, the Visigoth king Alaric did not want a sudden war with Francamia and, at their request, gave them Syagrius. After being executed in the same year 481 with him, the history of the Soissons region also ends. How can we be interested in this most stable stronghold of Roman influence in Gaul? In addition to the fact that the Soissons region conditionally survived the Western Roman Empire, this is certainly an opportunity to follow the birth of the supreme Frankish royal power. As you can see, the Franks had a huge number of kings, and Clovis was just one of them. However, Clovis, through his father Childeric, was the only soloist Frank who claimed not just one of the cities of Gaul, but the supreme military and civil power both among the Franks as Rex and among the Gauls of the Romans as the Roman Dux. It is not for nothing that the Eastern Roman Emperor Anastasius I recognized Clovis as a patrician because he positioned himself as the Roman military governor of Gaul and, according to tradition and analogy with Syagrius, declared himself the king of the Romans. Hence, he soon unleashed a war against the Visigoths. It was not just the desire of the barbarian king to assert his power, but it was also the result of Clovis's direct claims to all of Gaul as such. It can be said that this is precisely what his political representation will do. It was his family that was the first in the central royal dynasty of the conditional Frankish state, untouched Roman infrastructure and logistics. We can also judge that Clovis rose above other managers of the Franks due to the fact that he adopted the Roman political model of power that was preserved in these territories thanks to the Syagri. Not without reason, in 507 and 511, shortly after the war with the Visigoths, under his patronage, the first known lex of Frank steel law was born, the symbiosis of Roman and German customary law. This defined Clovis not only as a military governor but also as the supreme judge and legislator of the Franks, Gallus of the Romans, and all Germans in the territory of the former Roman Gaul. To some extent, the fall of the Soissons region and the battle with the Visigoths at Poitiers in 507 begins the history of the early Middle Ages in Western Europe and, at the same time, the history of the Frankish state. Despite the sad end of the Roman era in the Soissons region, the historical heritage of the Romans is still preserved. The ruins of ancient Roman fortifications, archaeological finds, and historical artifacts remind us of the greatness and power of the Roman Empire. Thank you for being with us on this journey through the history of the Soissons region. Stay with us and don't miss the next exciting historical adventures. See you soon.